Yo, what's up? Let me see if I can. Why is it always a little difficult to like sort of make sure that I'm on, like I'm doing the right thing or stuff like that? Okay, never mind. Let's just. I have a half an hour time. Like I've got 20 minutes or something. Right. So I've in this 20 minutes I've got to basically watch something interesting. And yeah, that's what I'm gonna do now. So I'm gonna watch something interesting for these 20 minutes. Right. I'll go to my favorite usual account because that's the best account to hang out in, right? So yeah, let me open that one, and yeah, let's see what we got for like 20 minutes. That's what we have. First, Filipino photographer who captured the entire nation. That's a little absurd. Dinosaur extinction gave us fruit. Nah, little too. It's like a little too niche. Don't be insufferably creative. Insufferable. Don't be insufferable. What? I don't know. Not for display, but for photographer and a child debate. This is a good film that I watched actually. It's a very interesting film, The Legend of Piranha. I mean, I don't know why I liked it, but it's kind of interesting. Rules of camouflage work you are only in India. The semiotics of memes. Nah, this all looks interesting. The person I don't know how he's gonna speak up. Ancient wisdom proven by science. Unhinged world of DIY guns, tales from the bottle. How to ride a lovable jerk. That's a good line. Yeah, but I'm not gonna watch that. Can we add profane to the dictionary? What is profane? I don't know. Where these where these movies really came from. That's an interesting analogy. I mean, that's an interesting topic. What is this? Integral theory, a complete map of conscious. Nah, it's a little too weird for me. To be, it's like movie ki tarah to be. Architectural style instantly. This luck should be impossible. I should probably watch something which is like a little. I think I should watch this. Yeah, it's like a good video essay, like 10 minutes, and it'll be fun to watch. Wait, let me change the audio of this thing so that I can hear my. Yeah, there you go.
And this is what he posted. If you use products like Whisper or ChatGPT,
Hollywood has a habit
Wait, I think I should probably look at these situations here. Restoring forests and spreading hope. Nah, never mind. We'll just watch this. Let's
of
go.
turning short, simple stories into feature-length films, and in some cases, an entire franchise. Occasionally, it works out well, like the first Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. The movie is based on a 1978 picture book of the same name, but its origins likely go back even further than that. The book is 32 pages long, and it doesn't exactly have a heavy-handed moral in the way most children's books did at the time. And unlike the film, it doesn't even really follow any characters. It opens with a family having breakfast, illustrated in black and white, and when a pancake goes flying through the air, it leads to the grandpa telling the kids a story about a town called Chew and Swallow, a place where it rains food 3 times a day, at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There are no food stores or anything like that because everything the residents need falls from the sky. The sanitation department is tasked with cleaning up all the scraps and feeding them to pets and animals, then putting the remaining food back into the earth. Eventually though, the weather starts to get out of control. Food gets larger, pancake storms and tomato tornadoes erupt, and quickly the town begins to fall apart. With buildings destroyed and institutions closing, the people of Chew and Swallow are forced out of their home. They sail away on sandwich boats, build sandwich homes on an island, and start to live like a normal civilization, opening supermarkets and actually cooking food. Again, there isn't much of a message aside from having too much of a good thing. It's just kind of a lighthearted story about food raining from the sky with some surreal illustrations. The 2009 movie adaptation unsurprisingly decided to take a lot of creative liberty, not only following an actual cast but also being more comedic and adding a lot more depth to its story.
Cal! Steve! Flint! Earl! Flint! You! guy.
It focuses on themes of overconsumption, personal ambition, father-son relationships, and media manipulation. It was definitely a case where they were able to take a short, simple concept and effectively turn it into a solid feature-length film, while still paying due homage to the source material. But the book may not have been the first place this concept was conceived. There's a medieval myth called the Land of Cockaigne that was first recorded around the 13th century. Although Cockaigne has appeared in many different forms throughout history, every version revolves around one thing: a world overflowing with food. Its descriptions feature cheese that rains from the sky, houses made of cake and hard candy. The people live a life of indulgence and leisure. Peasants live like kings, monks abandon their vows, and no work is mandated. Stories of this fictitious place allowed common people to humorously imagine a world free from suffering, work, and authority. It's referred to by some historians as the only utopia of the Middle Ages. The most famous depiction of Cockaigne is a painting by Pieter Bruegel, originally titled Het Lullikerland, which translates to the Lazy Tasty Land. The scene is placed in a dreamlike open field with three exhausted figures at the forefront: a peasant, a soldier, and a scholar, laying around a tree surrounded by abundant amounts of food. The table on the tree is positioned at an incline so the food can gradually slide right off and the men don't even have to get up. Animals are roaming around with silverware ready to be eaten. There's a fence made of sausage links, a cactus made of cakes. Pies are scattered across a roof and have seemingly rained from the sky. Below that roof is a knight with his mouth wide open, ready for whatever food falls next. But probably the biggest source of inspiration for Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs is the imagery in the top right. A man with a spoon in hand appears to be crawling out of a large sticky cloud that is assumed to be pudding. The book was originally written by Judy Barrett and illustrated by her husband, Ron Barrett. A large chunk of the artwork Ron made throughout his career was satirical, and considering Pieter Bruegel's painting is one of the most famous satirical works in Western art, there's a good chance he was inspired, though it isn't confirmed. While Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs had the advantage of being based on a well-known children's classic, Night at the Museum was a different story. The 2006 film was also based on a picture book, but the original story was relatively obscure, to the point where most people who saw the movie never actually knew it was based on a book. Originally released in 1993 by Milan Trench, Night at the Museum was a very simple story. Just like the movie, it follows a newly hired museum night guard named Larry, and he's tasked with watching over the dinosaur exhibit. Larry falls asleep, and when he wakes up, he realizes the dinosaur skeletons are missing. One of his coworkers informs him that sometimes they just get up and wander off, so he goes around the museum looking for them. Larry checks every exhibit, and in each one, other night guards ask him to get a task done for them while he's stopping by. He goes around the whole museum and the surrounding area until he gets back and learns that the fossils were hiding in the dinosaur room the whole time. The night guards had just scattered bones around and tricked him into doing their jobs. This one really doesn't have much of a moral at all. It was just through and through meant to entertain. The art style is comparable to something like Curious George, and the book doesn't try to insert some hidden symbolism or anything like that in its illustrations. Night at the Museum wasn't a hit. Even the author didn't think much of it. It was the first book Milan Trench ever wrote or illustrated, and it wasn't reviewed at all upon its release. Ironically, it was also banned from museums because it portrayed animals as alive and showed the guards sleeping, so he couldn't sell the book there. He came up with the idea one day after visiting the museum and thinking the exhibits looked alive. So he thought to himself, what if they were? Usually it is about reality being an illusion. Here it is about the illusion being a reality. In other words, it's the opposite of something like The Matrix or The Truman Show. He took this idea, combined it with the preconceived notion that night guards don't actually do anything, and began sketching. A few years later, Milan was working at Barnes & Noble, organizing the book displays in New York. One day his book was picked up by American filmmaker Chris Columbus, who had directed movies movies like Home Alone and Harry Potter. After reading it to his kids, he thought the story would make for a pretty cool movie, and the rest was history. Because Milan French thought so little of his book, he was surprised that Columbus approached him, and he didn't have any idea how they would turn it into a feature-length film. When asked about how the movie turned out, he couldn't have been more pleased, because he didn't have any expectations to begin with. I feel that the things that were so basic in my book were enhanced, but still remained true. The book went from being rejected by museums to having a movie adaptation premiered at the American Museum of Natural History. Even though the author never had much of a sentimental attachment to the story, he did feel like that was poetic justice in a way. The movie ended up doing very well, earning $574 million at the box office against a budget of $110 million. Surprisingly though, the book's sales weren't really impacted too much by the movies. The 32-page picture book led to a multi-million-dollar decade-long franchise, and most people never knew it existed. Zathura, A Space Adventure, though, was a pretty unique case. Rather than expanding a basic premise with mostly original material, Zathura is actually a somewhat faithful adaptation. Author of Jumanji and The Polar Express, Chris Van Allsburg originally wrote the book as a direct sequel to Jumanji, but weirdly enough, the movie never marketed it as such. Just like the film, it follows two kids named Walter and Danny, and after getting into a big argument, Walter chases his younger brother into a park, and they find a board game laying against a tree. The game they find at first isn't Zathura, it's Jumanji. Danny brings it back into the house and thinks it looks pretty lame, but underneath the Jumanji pieces is Zathura. There's a few reasons why things didn't play out like this in the movie, with rights complications being the biggest one. While they were both written by the same author, the Jumanji film rights involved multiple production partners, such as Interscope and TriStar Pictures. Acquiring them would have meant renegotiating and spending a lot more money. They also just wanted to give the film its own identity, but that may not have been the right choice. Zathura flopped pretty hard at the box office, just barely breaking even on its budget of $65 million. If they had tied it to the Jumanji name, it could have been more successful, or at least came closer to making a profit. But the movie definitely took some creative liberty in other aspects of the story. For starters, their sister is a completely original character. She's not in the book at all, so the whole cryo sleep section is also not present. Instead, they draw different cards that have slightly more comical effects, like Walter's polarity being reversed and getting pulled into the ceiling, or gravity shrinking Danny into a beach ball shape. Still, they both convey a similar message by the end of the story. The movie features an astronaut who is revealed to be Walter from the future, who wished his brother away after they got into a fight. Rather than being warned by his future self, in the book, Walter lands on a black hole space and gets sucked back in time to the beginning of the story. This time, he makes sure to throw the game away and gains a new appreciation for his brother. While things definitely play out in a different way, the film does a great job of capturing the essence of this story. This was another one where the author was pleased with how the studio expanded on his ideas.
They have augmented it quite successfully, I think, because they've added things to it, but everything they've added is consistent with the things that only exist as suggestions or the small kind of like, plot points that are in the book.
A big reason why they replaced things like Danny turning into a beach ball is that Jon Favreau wanted to use as many practical effects as possible, and it's why Zathura still looks so great to this day. There are plenty of other, more obvious examples of Hollywood adapting short stories, like anything Dr. Seuss, but these are some of the lesser known cases. It's a pattern that will keep happening forever. Sometimes it's a soulless cash grab, but every so often it inspires something even better than the original.
So it was an okay video. I mean, like, I would say it's just just an okay video. There's nothing more than that, right? Because there's actually nothing more than that. Because the point being, I actually have a lot of videos which are pretty weird in terms of like how. But let me show, like, because this quality is a good video, whatever. Like, he gets a lot of good videos, makes a lot of good videos. I want videos that are very slow and kind of like they have how do I say, like, mm, they have their stuff talking. They have like, why the fuck is it here? Remove from watch history. I don't want it here. So this is the film that I was talking about. It's a little weird film. This is also a different film. But yeah, that was not the point. The point being that I have to search that video, like shadow. something which is pretty beautiful, as in like I would not want it to be some kind of like just, video on something. This is a good, movie film. If it was to be, yeah, there you go, this one. But yeah, that's not the point. Let me, yeah, this is the video basically. But I don't. I think it's a little too bite-sized for me to watch it right now. You know what I mean? Like I should probably watch for something where some conversation is having. Like yesterday, what I watched was pretty cool. Let me open up that. Let me open up that. The channel was pretty cool. Like the Wall. I guess it's called Wall. VOL. Yeah, VAL. Yeah. It's an interesting thought that they've expanded upon. They've sort of delved into.
Let me try.
So I liked it.
Ankur, the proposal needs to be signed.
Now, but we don't have.
They
I'll watch it
actually
again.
like. And normies haven't because they've outsourced that work to everyone else. You see, we live in a time when everyone thinks they have taste because they know what's trending. But knowing what's trending isn't taste. I'm sorry, it's awareness of marketing, the algorithmic fluency, but not the artistic curiosity. You see it all the time, right? People dressing the same, speaking the same, posting the same, even the same half ironic playlist or the same disposable cameras or the same artsy poses. Yet they still think they're being original. That's what's wild about the modern era is that conformity now disguises itself as individuality. You know, people no longer say like, "Oh, I want to fit in." They say, "I just like the vibe." And but the vibe they like is the one that's currently being mass produced.
Got it.
The interesting people, though, they don't need to chase a vibe. They more so create their own world out of the fragments they have found. They're like cultural archaeologists. Okay, they're
It's actually nicely put. Cultural archaeologists.
digging through the noise, collecting relics that no one really has seen value in, and somehow they're assembling them into something that feels like them. And I think that's why cool people always seem slightly off grid, slightly disconnected from the mainstream conversation because their taste is shaped by their experience, not the algorithm's recommendation. But the funny thing is that this has nothing to do with rebellion, okay? It's not about being edgy or trying to be different for the sake of it. That's performative coolness. The kind of people who post hot takes just to look unique, but real cool people aren't rebelling against anything. They just refuse to be distracted from themselves.
That is a good line. I mean, the fact that real cool people aren't rebelling against anything. They're just they just were distracted. They just refuse to be distracted from themselves. That's a little nuts. They just it's a nice line. I mean, nice way to look at people.
They're not trying to be seen.
Where today I was like wondering about the Tanmay effect a lot. As in, like I was wondering, as in like, not like a lot thing, but I was like the susceptibility for a person to get open up, to sort of open up to a person who's not much shared and not much opinion, not much has not much been has not been opinionated much, like not voiced his or her opinion much, is very high compared to the person. It's very high. Susceptibility of opening up to a person who is not voiced his opinion enough, like much, is kind of is high compared to the susceptibility of opening up to a person who's just uh, been opinionated about things very much. It's like a very subjective thing because the kind of opinions being projected is also something that matters. Like what kind of opinions are we talking about? You know what I mean? But yeah, that's just like a very mere idea that I have about what it could be. Like yeah, let's just listen to it a little more.
as different, they just are different because they move through the world with their eyes open. They look for the things that make them feel alive, not the things that make them look alive. And when you start doing that, when you start actually paying attention to what moves you instead of what's popular, I think you start to begin to build your own internal system. You kind of start connecting the dots between random things like the color grading of old film, or the texture of a magazine ad, or the rhythm of a shoegaze song, or the way the architect used concrete in 1973. You start creating a world that belongs to you. And that's what real taste is: cultural awareness guided by emotional intelligence. But I don't
That's
think most
nicely put.
people never reach that point because they don't have the patience to sit with silence. They don't have the patience to feel the boredom long enough to notice that, what they're actually drawn to. So they fill every gap in their lives with content. And the moment you fill every page, you leave almost no room for discovery. And the cool, interesting people, they mostly sit in the gaps. They let time pass. They let their obsessions find them. They listen to albums from start to finish, watch movies alone without scrolling, walk through thrift stores with no plan, or they start collecting ideas the way others collect dopamine. That I think that's why they develop taste that feels lived in almost, because their taste comes from real experiences, not simulated ones. Well, you could say, right, like, who cares, Val, right? If people like what everyone else likes, what's the big deal? And that's fair. But here's where it kind of becomes sad a little bit, is that when everyone's taste is the same, no one
It feels
actually
the same.
feels anything anymore slowly. When everything's designed to be liked by everyone, it almost stops meaning anything to anyone. So, cool, interesting people, in a sense, preserve emotions, they preserve depth. They remind us that the point of art, fashion, music, and culture isn't to fit in, it's to feel something. But most people are almost terrified of this. They're scared that if they like something too different, it could possibly isolate them. And they're right. Sometimes it can and it will, and because real taste, it can be lonely at first. It's lonely to love something that no one really else gets. Sometimes it can and it will.
This word that he sort of is talking about is a little weird. I don't know. The fact that
Really isolate them.
sometimes if they like something too different, it could isolate them. I don't know. I don't know. Like, if they have the capability to like something which is too different, then it certainly means that be they can be that those persons who can like something which is so different. You know what I mean?
And
I
they're
don't know.
right. Sometimes it can and it will, and because real taste, it can be lonely at first. It's lonely to love something that no one really else gets. It's lonely to wear something people laugh at or listen to a band really no one has a clue of. But that loneliness, I think that's where identity begins to form. That's where your creative compass.
Loneliness. That's where identity begins to form. That's a good line. That's a very good line. That loneliness. The fuck is the lonely? I don't know the spelling. A loneliness. No, a moment for the sun to say this world is real.
Is born. So sometimes I like to think about this paradox that everyone wants to be unique, but no one wants to be alone. So they perform unique.
It's a very good line. It's a very good line. Everyone wants to be unique, but no one wants to be alone.
Uniqueness within this boundary of collective approval. They want the illusion
Within the boundary of collective approval.
of individuality, but not the responsibility of it. The responsibility of it means you have to stand alone for a while. It means you have to look around and realize, not everybody is clapping. And I think that's where most people like to turn back. That's when they stop curating and just start copying almost. But the ones who keep going, the ones who lean into that silence, they eventually come out with something real, something that actually has a fingerprint on it. And that's what makes them cool, interesting. It's not the outfit, it's not the music taste, it's not the confidence, it's that
Damn.
you could feel they made their choices themselves. They built a taste system almost that mirrors their inner world, and I think that's what makes them so incredibly magnetic. But coolness, in the end, right, is just the self awareness turned outwards. It's how self knowledge looks when it's dressed in sound, color, or texture. It's the way understanding yourself makes you move differently. And people pick up on that energy easily, and even if they can't really explain it. So the tragedy is that we've turned taste into a personality quiz. It's a way to signal belonging instead of meaning. We forgot that taste used to be this, spiritual thing. It used to reveal what a person noticed about the world. Now it just reveals which page they saw it on. So maybe the difference between cool people and normies isn't judgmental, it's more existential. One lives life like a curator, searching for what's real, and the other lives life like a consumer, searching for what's safe. So when you look at it that way, the whole idea of being cool stops feeling shallow and it starts kind of become sacred because maybe cool is just another word for
Imagine conducting every part of your research only on one platform. Meet Boreum.
I don't know what she's trying to say.
I want to say that taste isn't random. It's not something that you are completely born with. I think it's something you build. And the way you build it says everything about who you are when no one is really there. So most people think taste is about preference. Like, oh, I like this brand. I like that color. I like that kind of music. But that's very surface level. I think real taste goes incredibly deeper. Real taste is about awareness of how things make you feel, not
This actually very insightful. Like, as in, like, I like this, I like that means there's a certain instances where you only like that things. And it's not always that's gonna happen.
just how they make you look. And that awareness doesn't come from scrolling. I want to say I think it comes from paying attention to your reactions. Those small
Paying attention to your reactions is a very good line. Awareness comes from paying attention to your reactions. Awareness. That's actually a nice line. Like awareness comes from paying attention to your reactions.
fleeting moments
It's like you're listening to a song, but then you realize you have to realize that at some point eventually as to what level you're being connected to that song in terms of not in terms of any in any terms. Let's say the lyrical terms and let's say like a very physical sociological terms like as to what the song's vibrations and whatever like not vibrations like in a very general sense but like what's the how do I don't want to use the word vibe like what's the entirety of song doing to you in terms of like at that particular position where at that particular mental landscape what is actually it doing to you if you are sort of if you are sort of tapping into that domain of self-awareness that you would probably realize as to what it means to you and now that you've known what it means to you, you can put it in a category and for your own sake. Like it's okay, this is that, like that shit.
when someone or something resonates and you don't even know why. Maybe it's the sound, right, of a
Yeah,
guitar,
yeah.
or maybe it's the shape of a jacket that I don't know reminds you of your grandfather's
That's
old
little too
photos.
that's little too absurd, but yeah.
Maybe it's the color palette.
You knowing that makes you somewhat different because you knowing that would eventually put yourself in a pedestal where you can sort of box things, very niche things in a very niche box. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like suppose there's a red color jacket and then there's a red color banana. What? Yeah, assume that. So now red color banana would be kept in a different box compared to the red color jacket, despite both of them being red. Now a person with a not much niche awareness about the things, for that person, the both things are red in color, so the both things will be kept in the color, which is a bracket of red colored box. However, now that you see that there's a certain difference in what red color banana is and what red color jacket is, you you would know that difference, and because you would know that difference, you would put them in different boxes. So that's the point.
Of a movie that makes you feel like the inside of your own mind. You don't always have to have the words for it, but you can feel it. And interesting people, they listen to that feeling. They let it guide them. I think most
So let's guide them.
normies ignore that instinct because it doesn't fit the crowd. They suppress it until it disappears. Because that's what social conditioning teaches you to mute yourself for acceptance, to flatten your edges until you fit into the grid. And over time, people really lose the ability to tell what's theirs and what's borrowed.
What's
I
theirs
think
and
they
what's borrowed? That's actually a nice line of thinking. What's theirs, what's borrowed. It's like I sometimes wonder what thoughts are mine and what thoughts are borrowed. And if I can see the origin of that thought, I'll be like a little happy. Like I try to go for the origin of that particular thought. What's theirs? What's borrowed?
mistake exposure for connection. Just because you've seen something 1,000 times doesn't mean you understand it. And
Fair
yet,
enough.
most people build their whole identity off of exposure, not understanding.
That's actually a good way to probably, I don't know, if I can spot those people. A lot of people, a lot of exposure,
I think that's why
off
people build their whole identity off of exposure, not
off of exposure. Out of exposure, nahi off of exposure.
understanding. I think that's why so many people feel lost right now. It's not that they don't have interests, it's that their interests aren't really theirs. It was given to them, it was fed to them by the algorithm, by the feed, by the unspoken rules. They've been taught to
Implicitly, they brought
perform
it as well.
taste instead of experience it. And
They try to perform this
when you
instead of
create your own taste, when you go through the process of discovery and reflections, and you're doing something incredibly rare, you're defining where your perception ends and the world begins.
That's a little
So
too
I think
okay.
if we think about how curation works in art, a curator doesn't create the paintings, right? They arrange them. They decide what belongs together, what doesn't, what story the collection talks or tells. They
Fair
don't
enough.
add more. I think they remove what's unnecessary.
Okay, so wait, the creator and curators, let's talk about that difference. Actually, good question to ask. Like, would you want to be a creator or a curator?
So I think taste works the same way. You curate yourself by deciding what stays in your orbit and what doesn't. And that process, that constant editing is how your identity becomes clear. So interesting or authentic or cool, whatever you want to think of, are basically
What the fuck is going on in this video? ये क्या है? कौन लड़की है? क्या कर रही है?
self-curators. They gather fragments of the world that feel aligned with who they are, and they reject the ones that don't. It's really that simple. No matter how popular they might be, I think that's why their taste always feels coherent.
In days, that's pretty true. Like, there's a certain sense of coherence. Like, if it exists, it'll be amazing.
And it's not built.
So there are two things. Good memory. Good memory about their taste explains what? Explains their repetition. Their repetition. Their repetitive notion. The repetitive notion of staying in contact with good memory about their taste explains what. Because it's just not having a certain boundary of world view. That's what she's talking about, no? Like certain kind of boundaries she was talking about here.
So I think taste works the same way. You know, you create yourself by deciding what stays in your orbit and what doesn't. And that process, you know, that constant editing is how your identity becomes clear. So interesting or authentic or cool, whatever you want to think of, are basically self-curators. You know, they gather fragments of the world that feel aligned with who they are, and they reject the ones that don't. It's really that simple. You know, no matter how popular they might be, I think that's why their taste always feels coherent. And it's not built for approval. I think it's just, you know, how it means to them. Form taste instead of experience it. And when you create your own taste, you know, when you go through the process of discovery and reflections and you're doing something incredibly rare, you're defining where your perception ends and the
Yeah,
world
this is what
begins.
she's talking about. No? Oh, the perception ends and the world begins. That's pretty dope. Like I mean, I didn't hear the world begins. Certain boundary of a perception. Boundary of perception is what we're talking. Because it's just not having a certain boundary of perception. It's I don't know what you khatam kar do anime. After that, you're
So I
talking
think
about
if we think about how curation works in art, a curation and that process are basically self-curators. You know, they gather fragments of the. That's why their taste always feels coherent, and it's not built for approval. I think it's just, you know, how it means to them. So normies, on the other hand, don't edit. You know, they just add. They collect everything they see until their whole identity becomes cluttered. And you can tell. You can tell because they're always chasing the next thing, the next aesthetic, the next drop, the next influencer approved moment of validation. Their sense of self depends on staying current. And I think that's the curse of it all. You know, once your identity is built on what's current, you will never ever stop running. So people with real taste move slower. They're not
that's a good line. People with real taste move slower. क्या हुआ क्या क्या हुआ क्यों क्यों ये move slower.
not in a hurry to adopt or abandon.
They're
They
not in a
give
hurry to
things
adapt.
time to breathe. They live with their interests long enough to understand them. And that patience, that slowness, I think is what gives their taste depth. You can feel when someone's, you know, genuinely lived with their influences. Their clothes tell a story, their rooms, you know, feel intentional, their playlist doesn't really sound like others. Everything feels completely fresh and
Coherent,
earned.
fresh.
And I think that's because taste at its highest form isn't about things you like, it's about the relationships you've built with them.
Damn, that's a good line. Yes, it's like you're like it's never always about liking a particular thing. It's always like something more deeper to it. It's like this kind of shape it is, and you gotta have to make this kind of shape so that it can sort of fit in. You know what I'm saying? Like this is this, and this is this. So it's kind of fitting in instead of this. This won't fit. It's like it's never simply like this. It's gonna be like something very intricate with that particular media that you like and stuff like that, whatever.
What if I think
relationship they build with
psychologically,
them.
maybe this might all tie to something deeper, the development of an inner world almost, I want to say, So cool people have rich inner worlds, right? They spend time alone. It's not really an escape, but a way to listen to themselves. They like to process things, they reflect more, they create context for what they love. But normies, right? They kind of outsource their inner world to social validation. Their opinions are formed through conversations. And the less time they spend in solitude, the more they rely on others to confirm what's worth liking. So I think that's why solitude is so important for building taste, because in silence, there's really no feedback loop. There's no dopamine rush for likes. There's no reassurance like, oh, you're on the right track. I think you're forced to develop an internal compass to decide for yourself what resonates. And once that compass strengthens, I think everything starts to change. You kind of stop seeking permission to like what you like. You stop apologizing for your taste. You stop needing validation for things that, that make sense to you. So that's the psychological foundation of cool, I feel like. It's not really rebellion, it's not mystery. I think it's just emotional independence. But it's hard to maintain that in the modern world. Like, algorithms are designed to flatten taste, to reduce everyone to the same aesthetic median, the same neutral minimalism, the same lo-fi soundtrack, the same moody tones. Like we all call it aesthetic cohesion, but really it's just cultural sedation. It's like that's the paradox of it all. The more we chase aesthetics, the less aesthetic sensitivity we actually have. And everything starts to look the same because everything is designed for engagement, not emotion. So interesting, authentic people resist that by not consuming like everyone else. I think they go looking for things that aren't really being pushed. They seek texture, contradictions, imperfections, and I think they really find beauty in what's overlooked because that's where the truth hides almost. Normies crave what's digestible. Cool people crave what's alive. It's really interesting, but when you strip it all down, the I want to say
I don't know, like, I mean, how I always wonder as to how this person has actually written all this. Like, it's so difficult to write stuff like this. You can simply just, I don't know, you have to be in some kind of flow state to be able to write on all these things. This, like, I mean, of course, the element of drawing parallels between normies and these things in terms of like, just a line later, a line. Normals crave for digestible, cool people
what's
crave for
alive.
life.
It's it's really interesting,
It's a pretty good line in terms of like a poetic, in a very poetic sense.
but when you strip it all down, the I want to say that like psychology of taste is basically the psychology of attention. What you choose to look at, listen to, wear,
That's
or
very
feel,
true. That's very
that's your
true.
attention pattern. And when your taste is intentional, your conscious becomes yours again. I think maybe that's why people with taste feel so magnetic. They're not just showing you cool things, they're showing you how they see. And I think that's the most intimate thing you can share with someone, your way of seeing in this world. I mean,
Hmm.
like, think about it. When you fall in love with someone's taste, what you're really falling in love with is their perception.
The perception.
Their ability to notice beauty when others see nothing, to connect patterns between things that don't really relate, to find meaning in the overlooked corners of the world. And I think that's why cool people don't even need to talk much. I think their environment speaks for themselves. Their presence tells you they've paid attention to life, that they've been awake long enough to gather what others have missed. And I think that's what's missing in most people today. I want to say that alertness, that curiosity, because you can't build a taste without curiosity. You can't mimic it. Sure, I mean, you can mimic it. Sure, yeah. You can study the aesthetics of curiosity, but you can't fake the hunger to find things that no one really told you about. So, if taste becomes identity, then maybe creation is the purest form of self expression left in a very performative world right now. Because everything else, your online persona, your job title, your politics, like all of it is shaped by social reward systems. But your taste, I mean, I think that's one thing that is still sacred because it's built, in silence within yourself. Like the question is, how much of your taste actually belongs to you, though?
There's a lot of
How
things
much of
inside
it
it I
is
don't like.
inherited, automated, or borrowed? So if you were cut off from the internet for a year, would your sense of style, your favorite music, your creative inspiration, would all of this remain the same? I think that's something we should ask ourselves.
Ponder upon.
Most people wouldn't know who they are without social media.
Come on, you can't do that. I think that's about it. That's about the life, I suppose. And I'm gonna just end the stream right now because I've already spoken enough. I mean, I haven't really spoken, but yeah, whatever. This is a good video. It's got substance in it, like in terms of like providing me a POV to look at, why I look at life from. It's good. So yeah, bye bye. Have a good whatever.